Hello and welcome to Africa 54. I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. Here's what's coming up. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken begins a tour of West Africa to discuss security challenges. We'll take an in-depth look at the toll the war between Israel and Hamas is taking on civilians as 100 days of brutal fighting passes. And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis abruptly ends his bid for the White House as New Hampshire prepares to hold its presidential primary on Tuesday. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. We begin our broadcast in West Africa, where new Liberian President Joseph Boakai had to be helped away from the podium after he paused twice during his inauguration speech on Monday. The 79-year-old who defeated George Weah in a runoff election in November took the oath of office in an outdoor ceremony in sweltering heat in the West African nation's capital, Monrovia. Boakai then paused during his speech, and aides rushed to his side and fanned him. He resumed his speech a few minutes later, but paused again. Reporters at the scene say the ceremony was curtailed and aides helped him walk away from the podium. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the United States is committed to deeper relations with Africa despite a global crisis, as he opened a trip in the shadow of coups and the rising influence of Russia and China on the continent. Blinken is touring 4 democracies on the Atlantic coast: Cape Verde, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, and Angola, as security deteriorates in the Sahel and doubts grow about a key U.S. base in coup-hit Niger. America's top diplomat arrived in Cape Verde Monday before heading to Ivory Coast in his first trip to sub-Saharan Africa in 10 months, as he takes a break from a time-consuming focus on the Israel-Hamas war. Many Africans are uneasy about the U.S. attention to the Middle East and Ukraine, and President Joe Biden failing to live up to a promise to visit the continent in 2023. Blinken is expected Monday evening at an African Cup of Nations match in Abidjan. Blinken spoke during his visit to Cape Verde.
The United States is committed to deepening, to strengthening, to broadening our partnerships across Africa, partnerships that benefit Africans and Americans alike. As President Biden has said, we are all in when it comes to Africa.
That was U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. For more on Blinken's visits to West Africa, I'm joined from here in Washington by Kwaku Nuama, a professor at the American University School of International Service. Professor Nuama, welcome back to Africa 54.
Thanks for having me, Esther.
Now, how significant is Blinken's visit to West Africa?
I think it's important because this is in fulfillment of a promise that President Biden made to visit Africa last year that never happened. And the secretary himself was there in March of last year. And since then, there's been a lot of developments on the continent, including the coup d'etat and deterioration of the situation in the Sahel. And also, we just saw the non-aligned movement meeting in Kampala. New issues have come up, so this is as good a time as any to visit.
Now, you talk about the chaos in West Africa. We've seen those coups that you just mentioned, but what can the United States do to bring stability to the region?
Well, one of the things that the United States can do is to help the governments that are in the region solve the problems that's leading to coups. A lot of African countries are struggling to provide a meaningful economic life for their citizens. And so the United States cannot just go in there and preach morality and democracy. It has to actually help these governments solve problems, including security challenges as well. So I hope that these are not just talks and lectures, but actually something substantive comes out of the visit.
And on a lighter note, Kwaku, U.S. Secretary of State is taking at least some kind of short break to enjoy the games happening in Abidjan. Your thoughts on this after all the shadow diplomacy Blinken has had to make?
Well, I hope he sees a good match, but more importantly, the match is going to be played in a stadium that was built by the Chinese. So whilst he's there, he needs to learn from the Chinese. The Chinese are not just going in there giving speeches. They're also helping Africans develop their infrastructure. These are meaningful commitments to the relationship. So we want to see the United States also put its money behind the mouth.
And quickly, even when President Biden does visit the region, what would that kind of visit mean?
It will be big. It will say that Africa is important to the United States. And I understand that the president is busy and the president has all kinds of things going on. But you saw how quickly he went to Israel. Why is that? Because Israel is very important in American politics, because there is a pro-Israel constituency that demands that the United States pays attention to what happens in Israel. So maybe what you and I and other Africans who pay taxes in this country and who vote in this country's elections should do is to demand that American politicians take Africa seriously in exchange for our support. They can't just take us for granted. Africa is important to us, and it's important to Americans as well. And if they want us to keep supporting them, they need to show up and show that they care about Africa.
Professor, thank you very much for your insight. Kwaku Nuama is a professor at the American University School of International Service. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi says he will not allow any threat to Somalia or its security. His comments come after Ethiopia said it would consider recognizing an independence claim by Somaliland.
My message here is for the Ethiopians. It is permissible to get benefits from the brothers in Somalia, Djibouti or Eritrea through traditional means, to have the opportunity to make use of the ports in these countries. This is something no one would refuse. But to try to jump on a piece of land so it is controlled in a way or another, like the agreement with Somaliland, no one will agree to this.
In a memorandum of understanding signed on January 1st, Ethiopia said it would consider recognizing Somaliland's independence in return for gaining access to the Red Sea. Somaliland declared independence from Somalia in 1991, but it has not won recognition from any country. For insight into the escalating tensions between Ethiopia and Somalia, I'm joined from Nairobi, Kenya by Macharia Munene, a professor of history and international relations at the U.S. International University in Nairobi. Professor, these tensions have caught the attention of the United States, and the CIA chief is now in the region for talks. What's likely to be the outcome of his visit?
Well, the likely outcome is to make it clear to the leaders concerned, like President Bhutto and others, what the American interests are. And whoever the line is, not to cross that, because they do not want to see escalation of this. And passing the message to Nairobi and Mogadishu is not a bad idea. And since it's coming directly from the top, then it will be taken very seriously.
Professor, the IGAD meeting that just ended in Uganda said the Ethiopia and Somaliland agreement should have been with Somalia and not Somaliland. But after 30 years since the breakaway from Somalia, why are there, aren't there some kind of options to discuss the way forward to recognize Somaliland as an independent nation?
Well, for one, it violates a principle of the AU, right from the formation in 1963 of the OAU. No annexation of territories, no contracting, no expansion. So what Ethiopia is doing is to violate that principle, and the IGAD, I think, was right. But so there is no option of having Somaliland getting recognition unless you want to destroy the whole country. It is not possible.
What role can the African Union play here to ease the tensions in that region, given that, you know, it's already plagued by instability when you look at the other chaos happening in Sudan?
Well, the AU as an organization can make it very clear to Ethiopia, to Prime Minister Abiy, that what he's doing is not acceptable. We've made statements previously indicating he might use some force somewhere. So just be told that the entire African Union does not support him and will not endorse him in any way. Then he might be able to sober up a little bit and stop thinking that he can get away with what is intentionally an aggression on a neighboring country.
Should the leaders of that region be concerned about a likelihood of the Al-Shabaab group, trying to take advantage of these tensions and perhaps, create some more chaos?
Well, they should be concerned, but the Al-Shabaab would take that opportunity to make it acceptable as a defender of Somali interests, as opposed to being the terrorists now to appear as if it's the good side and Ethiopia is the bad one, to take advantage of this situation to gain acceptability and people stop hearing it. That I think it's already doing.
Professor Munene, thank you very much for your insight into the tensions in the Horn of Africa. Macharia Munene is a professor of history and international relations at the United States International University in Nairobi.
Tensions in the Middle East are flaring after a strike in the Syrian capital Damascus killed 5 Iranian Revolutionary Guards commanders Saturday. Iran's President Ebrahim Raisi blamed Israel and vowed retaliation. The Jewish state hasn't claimed responsibility and continues focusing on hitting Hamas targets in Gaza. That's in response to a terrorist attack launched by the group in October that killed 1,200 people. About 240 people were also taken hostage. Since the Israel-Hamas war began, the United States, a staunch supporter of Israel, has also seen its military presence in the Middle East come under attack dozens of times. On Saturday, the target was its Al-Assad air base in Iraq.
It was a very serious attack using a capability of ballistic missiles that pose a genuine threat through the skill of U.S. forces. And the United States has demonstrated in the past when these attacks have taken place in Iraq and Syria that we are going to respond when we deem it's necessary to reestablish and try to establish deterrence in these situations and to hold these groups accountable that continue to attack us.
With Gaza health officials reporting more than 25,000 people killed so far in the Israel-Hamas war, the United States isn't easing its pressure on Israel to protect civilians and to allow additional humanitarian assistance to be delivered.
They've announced in recent days that they're going to allow flour to be delivered to an Israeli port in Ashdod and then brought into Gaza. These are small but consequential steps, but they're also not enough.
Amidst food shortages, volunteers have been distributing bread to displaced Palestinians in Rafah. The situation, however, is unsustainable, warned UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres during the 19th summit of the Non-Aligned Movement held this weekend in Kampala, Uganda.
People are dying not only from bombs and bullets, but from lack of food and clean water, hospitals without power and medicine, and grueling journeys to even smaller slivers of land to escape the fighting. This must stop.
But even as he faces domestic pressure from relatives of the Israeli hostages to reach a deal with Hamas, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu took to social media Saturday, repeating his earlier vow of destroying Hamas and underscoring the need to retain security control over Gaza after the war ends.
The State of Israel must have security control over all the territory west of the Jordan River. This is a necessary condition, and if it conflicts with the idea of Palestinian sovereignty, what to do?
His remarks put into question the two-state solution with the Palestinians that the United States and other parties have backed for years as a permanent solution to the conflict. Veronica Valderas Iglesias, VOA News, Washington.
Still to come, the Republican primaries has dwindled down to 2 candidates. We'll have a report. Stay with us.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
In other news, Cameroon on Monday launched the first malaria vaccination program to be offered nationwide. The World Health Organization says the mosquito-borne disease kills more than 600,000 people a year, largely in Africa. Children under 5 account for more than 80% of deaths on the continent. Libya's state-owned energy firm, the National Oil Corporation, says production has resumed at Al Shahara oil field. 2 weeks ago, protests led to a shutdown at the oil field. Repeated interruptions in crude production in the war-torn North African country have been caused by social and political protests amid clashes between rival factions. And 5 kidnapped Nigerian sisters have been rescued by the Federal Capital Territory Police and the Army after being abducted at the start of the year by gunmen who burst into their home 25 kilometers from Abuja. The attackers, however, killed one sister when a ransom deadline passed. Police say the girls have been reunited with their families. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has abruptly ended his presidential campaign, making it a 2-person Republican contest in the small northeastern U.S. state of New Hampshire, which holds its presidential primary Tuesday. VOA's Caroline Presutti is there and explains how the state could turn U.S. politics upside down.
Biden. Not what you'd expect to hear hours before a presidential primary. But this is the quirky state of New Hampshire.
Hey, everybody, how are you?
Where President Joe Biden is not on Tuesday's ballot. A move by national Democratic leaders, which some consider a snub.
People said, we're going to put that aside and we're going to support Joe Biden because we all know Donald Trump is going to be the nominee. And the most important thing we can do to save democracy is to stop Donald Trump.
This is from 1992 convention.
Ray Buckley chairs the New Hampshire Democratic Party. But on Tuesday, Biden will not get his vote.
Since my election as chair, I've written in Jimmy Carter every single time to show that I am completely unbiased.
Buckley has voted for Democratic incumbent presidents in the past, but this time...
We were in shock and stunned.
The Democratic National Committee demoted New Hampshire from its historic spot as the first state primary in favor of South Carolina, with its more diverse voters. Angry state party officials scheduled the primary anyway.
We are going to the polls on Tuesday.
And Biden supporters began a write-in campaign. On the Republican side, a different kind of drama. In a windy -10 degrees Celsius, this is the line 4 hours before a Donald Trump event.
We love the Trumpster. He fights for us.
How many wars did we have when he was president? Everybody was happy. Everybody was making money.
Former President Donald Trump is pulling in the crowds at his rallies and polling at just over 50% among New Hampshire voters. Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley is at 35% in the Boston Globe poll.
She needs to sway me, so I'm open-minded to whatever it is she has to say.
Like Denise Montminy, many in line to see Haley are independents or Democrats who can vote on a Republican ballot here.
I'd like to hear a little less war hawkish rhetoric from her in terms of her stance on Ukraine and Israel-Palestine conflict.
Analysts say New Hampshire Republicans who are fiscal conservatives interested in lower taxes and smaller government could be Haley's last chance to stop Trump.
If she can't in a state that is tailor-made for that, I think it's fair to ask, well, what is the next step? What is the state where she will have another chance to beat Trump? And the number of states I can come up with is a very, very, very short one.
On Tuesday night, we find out whether New Hampshire voters offer any surprises. Carolyn Presutti, VOA News, Manchester, New Hampshire.
When enjoying a fine perfume, a person might not be aware that one of its main ingredients comes from the remote Comoros Islands in the Indian Ocean. It's ylang ylang oil, and the people who produce the flower oil are asking for a larger share of the profit. Ruth Elmendorp reports from the Comoros capital, Moroni.
The Comoros Islands are home to fine fragrances, but the most valuable of these is the rare ylang ylang oil, which is used in major perfume brands. Mahmoud Aboud is one of the many perfume distillers in the region. The 64-year-old businessman says ylang ylang flower oil used to be a lucrative commodity.
Since COVID, the production has gone very low because of COVID and other major reasons, depending on the international market.
The Comoros' ailing economy is heavily reliant on fisheries and bananas, while its tourist potential remains untapped. People in the Comoros are hoping President Azali Assoumani, who was re-elected this week, will do more to grow the economy. Mariama Ali Abdoukou is a 47-year-old mother of 5.
We want better education and improvement of the economy. We expect the new president to do this.
To boost their and the country's fortunes, ylang ylang distillers suggest a better positioning of their oil on the international market.
When you plant it in the Comoros, it's very special because you get an oil that you cannot get it anywhere in the world. Like you get 5 qualities of the oil, but the super extra and the extra, which is used in high-end perfume, you only get it in the Comoros.
The World Bank says the oil producers pumped $20 million into the Comoros economy. But perfume brands like Chanel and others make a much larger profit from the oil. Mahmoud Aboud is adding more value to his oil by upgrading it into a perfume that is sold in Dubai, thereby making his flowers and distillation worth more.
If you make the perfume and the people will understand that this is a product which is coming from the Comoros, many people will come and buy directly from us instead of buying from the trader somewhere in France.
The Comoros ylang ylang oil distillers hope they can use the hidden value of their work to bring a sophisticated touch and a fresh-smelling future to the remote island group. Ruth Elmendorp, VOA News, Moroni, Comoros.
Now we turn our attention to the Africa Cup of Nations in Ivory Coast, where VOA's Mukbil Yabaru is joining us live with the latest. Hello, Mukbil.
And this is match day 3. I'm here in Abidjan, Ivory Coast. There will be 4 exciting games happening today with a ton of implications. For the first 2 games, it'll be Equatorial Guinea and the host nation, Ivory Coast. And then on the other side, we will have Nigeria versus Guinea-Bissau. Now, Nigeria and Equatorial Guinea at the top of that Group A at the moment with 4 points, meaning that if either of them get a win, then they will advance to the next round. If either of them, if one of them does and the other one doesn't, then one of the potential other teams can kind of sneak in there. So the Ivorians at the moment are just trying to make sure that they're able to win this game to get through to the next phase. Now we have Group B. Small island country by the name of Cape Verde, the Blue Sharks, are at the very top of that group. We have them for 6 points, and they are comfortably at the top. Egypt is very next. They have 2 points. Ghana and Mozambique will be playing in the 8 p.m. game as well against each other. Egypt versus Cape Verde on the other side. And Cape Verde might not play their top players simply because they have 6 points and they might want to keep them safe for the next round. But nobody would have expected that Egypt and Ghana would have to kind of battle it out to make it through to the next phase. Now, if we're just looking at teams that have performed well, we have the defending champion Senegal having scored 6 goals over 2 matches. They've played excellent. I would also put, South Africa had an amazing bounce back game. Bafana. They lost their first game and they came back yesterday and won 4-0 against Namibia. So this tournament is shaping out to be one amazing tournament where you don't really know who is going to win and who's going to go through to the next level. But I'm here for it all. and I will be excited to watch all the games happening later on today. That's all from me. I'm Mukbil Yabro here in Abidjan, Ivory Coast. Back to you all in Washington.
Thanks, Mukbil. That was VOA's Mukbil Yabaro reporting live for us from Abidjan, Ivory Coast. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.
In times of change, when the world seems uncertain, and what we hear doesn't reflect what we see, we seek the truth. When we are told only part of the story, we lose trust. In moments of crisis, our dreams, hopes, and wishes for a better tomorrow depends on a free press. At Voice of America, we bring you the stories that people take risks to see. We connect the world and unite it with truth. At Voice of America, we show you the whole picture.